Hello and welcome to Yerushalmi Berachos Daf Pei Ches Amud Aleph and Beis. And those that are print, this is once again a jam-packed agadata and some interesting ha'aras that have to do with making brachos on things that we see. So the Gemara says, Tani was taught in a brayso, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shlosha Devarim Sarach Adam Lo B'chol Yom. Person has to say these things, three things every day. One is Baruch Shlos Ani Gai, another one is Shlos Ani Bor. Now, and then Shlos Ani Isha, which is not for now. So, remember I mentioned this earlier, and I quoted the Gemara in Menachos. It's a Gemara right here. It's a Yerushalmi right here. So the Bavli in Menachos Daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis talks about this, and the reason that it actually gets rid of Shlos Ani Bor. What's a bor? So Tosas explains that it means someone who's ignorant from Mishnah and Mikra, and who is not gainfully employed, and that's usually how we imply it. But the Gemara there has a kasha, and it says that, well, how can you make a bracha on something? How can you say Shlos Ani Bor? The Gemara has a couple of problems with it, but one of them is that it's not that Hashem didn't make you a bor, right? The Mishnah says in Avos, Ein bor yorei chet. So a bor doesn't fear sin. So what that means is that basically it's dependent on your free will. It's not Hashem didn't create you to have fear of sin. You have free will to decide whether you have fear of sin or not. So how can you make a bracha about that? Hashem didn't create you that way. So the Bavli actually switches it and says Shlos Ani Avid. That okay, that's the bracha, which is the three Shlos Anis that we make in the morning. So, but the Yerushalmi leaves off that you say it. So what does Yerushalmi do with this kasha of free will? But the answer is that probably simply that a person has a tendency that sometimes Hashem makes someone and takes away their das, so it makes them have more of a tendency not to be interested in Torah and Yerushalmi. Gainfully employed is a choice for many people. It's not always. People lose jobs and people have struggles in life, but there's a certain element of choice there. Not to learn and know Mikra Mishnah is a choice that's there, and so it's just interesting to think about that. And that's according to the Yerushalmi, we actually make that bracha. I don't know anyone that does, although I've seen some Sidurim that actually print other stuff, but I don't think that's a normal thing that most people do. Okay, the next thing is the Gemara says a couple of things. One of them is, and the Bavli has some overlap. I'm not clear exactly where the overlap is, but I just want to say it, that Habriyos Akusi, if someone sees someone that looks different, so we make a Mishaneh Habriyos, okay? It's Machlokes Rishonim, whether that's one time or every 30 days or anytime they see it. But we'll get to a svar in a minute. Esakatua, if you see someone whose feet were amputated, Esasuma, or a blind person, Esamukeshchin, someone smitten with boils, so he says Baruch Dayana Emes. Now, many of the Rishonim point out very appropriately that this is not once in a lifetime, l'chora, because when a person sees someone that has this, so their compassion is arisen, and they actually feel that. So one can make that. We don't say that Baruch Dayan Emes is on one death, and that person never makes that bracha again. Or we don't say a Shechianu is a one-time thing, right? This is a bracha that is relevant. If someone sees someone in pain, they make this bracha. Then the Gemara says an interesting thing. That bracha says only when they were born whole and healthy, but then later on had an emergency, had a medical issue that caused this. Or whatever happened to them, a tragic thing. So then we say Baruch Dayan Emes, but otherwise we just say Baruch Mishaneh Briyos. So I'm not clear exactly what the Bavli holds on this exact thing, although it's beyond the scope of this conversation right now. There's the Shulchan Aruch on it, etc. But the bottom line is that, like the Mishnah Berurah himself says that if a person feels distress for his friend that went through something, obviously he could make these brachos. But there is that chilek that when something bad happens to a person, we say a Dayan Emes. Now, I try to visit people once in a while in the hospital. People have gone through stuff. I've never seen anybody make a Dayan Emes. It's usually, I see it's reserved for death, Rahman al-Islam. Maybe that's because people just kind of have a perspective on that. But even Mishaneh Habriyos, again, people wouldn't necessarily feel so good having that bracha being made on them. We have to be respectful towards people also. But again, maybe on the animals, it's not such a big deal. I know people that have gone to the zoo and made these brachas, etc. Last two things I want to say is that the Gemara says that if someone sees a attractive person, so he makes a special bracha. So there's a lot to learn from this Gemara, but basically there's a story through Gamliel that he saw a guy who was very attractive, beautiful woman, and he made this bracha. So a couple of things. First of all, the Gemara itself explains later that he wasn't staring at her; he just happened to see her while walking in an alleyway. It was an accident. Okay. But second of all, you see that he understands this musig of beauty, whatever it is. Maybe nowadays we look at these pictures from hundreds of years ago, we say, what's beauty? But the bottom line is that there is a musig there of it. He understood it. But the Gemara says, I have lo sechanim, you shouldn't show them favor. So herein lies part of that answer of that he wasn't staring at her. No, he wasn't giving her chen. He wasn't, again, like I said, in a negative and positive, he didn't say it in front of her. Oh, you're so beautiful. It's not appropriate. He was talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom. He was just saying, Rebbeinu Shalom, you created beauty in this world, and he was admiring that the Rebbeinu Shalom created beauty in this world. Shekach Bora Briyos knows Ba'olamo. He's talking to Hashem. And that's why it says that even if he saw a gamalna or a susna or a hamarna, so a person could say this bracha that Bar Briyos knows Bolamo. I one time went to a dog show and people were talking about the beauty of dogs. I don't appreciate it, but maybe people that appreciate it would have an opportunity to make that bracha. Last thing I want to mention is Rahman al-Talan, unfortunately, in Yana Dioma, and just a little contrast between Balvi and Yerushalmi on this one, because Shmuel says, Ein avad ahein zika b'ksil. Sorry. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay. Tani Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara is taught, Masriyan al ha-zivaos. We sound the shofar in a city when there's an earthquake. And that's what I mean by in Yana Diom, what's going on. It's supposed to waken us up. We all know the... And by the way, Rahman al-Talan, they've reported that there have been a few Jewish deaths there. One of the chief rabbi of one of the areas, I forgot where it was, and his wife were missing. We know that Jewish people have been impacted. Of course, not the large amount have not been, but and we know the famous Ran that talks about that whenever a calamity happens anywhere in the world, it's a message to the Rebbeinu Shalom is sending to the Jewish people as well, that we need to think about what's Hashem trying to tell us and work on our actions. But the Yerushalmi says explicitly that we sound the shofar, whatever that means. Back then they used to blow it, etc., which is a Mishaneh in Tainus, so we'll get to in a second, specifically on earthquakes. And the Bavli doesn't say this, except it really does. The Bavli says mapolis, on a collapsed building, which implies that something made it fall down. Now, it could be a collapsed building because of a structural issue, but it also could be something that was caused by an earthquake. So there is an overlap there, but the Bavli doesn't say it explicitly. But l'chora, the idea is that we're trying to be more rachamim and tshuva, so the person should recognize, what's it called? The person should recognize that we have to work on these things. So Hashem should protect us and save us, and as we learn these brachos, that's a kiyum of them in itself, just the Torah. Of course, we're learning at Almanas Lasos to have opportunities to understand when to do it. Thank you for joining and have a great day.